Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's Planning Application Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Tvedkowicz. I'm Chair of the Planning Applications Committee. Item number 1 on the agenda is just to go through procedures regarding evacuation, so I shall read this out verbatim. Fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated. I'll come to that in a minute with mobile phones, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future publication on the Council's website. Please can I ask that if you have a mobile phone that you either turn it off or turn it to silent during the meeting. Okay, item number 2, apologies. I have one apology from Councillor Pandher, and he's been substituted by Councillor Harbison. So, Councillor Harbison, thank you for volunteering to join us tonight. Are there any other apologies that we have? No? Okay. So item 3 then is the minutes. So hopefully, members, you've all had an opportunity to study the minutes. Am I okay to sign those off? Is there anyone who has any objections or issues to that? No? Okay, so I shall sign those off now. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest not included on the schedule? Councillor Green.
Yes, I've recently become a member of the Fellowship of George Eliot, and I'll get that added to the schedule for the next meeting.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in the process of updating my register of interests due to a recent change of employment. It doesn't conflict with any of the items tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hartshorn. Any other members? No. Can I ask then, item number 5, are there any declarations of contact? Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had contact with resident when the planning was submitted for item 5. I did actually ask them to write in with their objections, but I didn't indicate my intentions at the time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. Okay, in that case, we will move on then to the public consultation. So I've got planning application 037294, site 46810 to the area of 89169 Tunnel Road, Nuneaton. I think that's our first item. So if you'd like to take us away. So just for those who are not aware of not seeing an agenda, we do have actually quite a busy agenda tonight. We've got 9 items, which is rather a lot. So we will try to get through those as quickly as you can. So I'll hand over to Phil now. He'll take us through that first item.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline application of a site of 3.6 hectares for up to 70 dwellings, with access only currently being considered, with all other matters reserved. The proposal affects public footpath N54 and Tree Preservation Order 702. The site is located to the rear of 89 to 169 Tunnel Road, Galley Common in Nuneaton. There are a number of previous applications on this site, some of which have been approved and others have had refused. An application on this site for residential development of up to 105 dwellings was refused and further dismissed at appeal by the Planning Inspectorate. This appeal remains relevant for this application. The Council has received an appeal against non-determination of this application. This means that the local authority is no longer the determining authority. Therefore, the recommendation is to make a resolution to refuse planning permission and defend the appeal against non-determination for the reasons as printed. The key issues for this application are the principle of the development, visual amenity and landscape character, heritage asset and archaeology, the impact on highway safety, flooding and drainage, ecology, biodiversity and open space, residential amenity, contamination, land stability, noise and air quality, and planning obligations. The full details of these key issues can be found within the report. The Council are recommending refusal of this application on 3 grounds. The first reason for refusal is the principle of the development. This is due to the site being outside of the settlement boundary. Whilst the site is unallocated, this in itself is unlikely to weigh significantly against the proposal. However, policy DS3 of the Borough Plan requires all new unallocated development outside of the settlement boundary to be limited to uses that can be demonstrated to require a location outside of the settlement boundary. This application site does not meet the criteria of uses, and as such, the principle of residential development is unacceptable. The second reason of refusal is the impact on the non-designated heritage asset. Warwickshire archaeologists have been consulted and object to the scheme due to the impact on the non-designated heritage asset of the site and its almost total loss. Their comments reference a previously dismissed appeal decision on this site, which was refused due to the impact on the non-designated heritage asset. Therefore, the harm to the historic landscape as a non-designated heritage asset is considered to weigh significantly against the application. The final reason for refusal is due to the impact on highway safety. Access is being considered within this outline permission and is not being reserved for consideration at reserve matters stage. A road safety audit has been submitted with this application. Warwickshire County Council Highways have been consulted and object to the proposal, stating that it would have a severe impact on the highways network. The audit confirms that the Plough Hill Road junction is over capacity and additional trips will lead to a gradual worsening of the situation. Mitigation would be required to allow development to come forward. In addition, the proposed layout drawing may not prevent visibility displays being obstructed and may create additional conflicts or hazards for the loading and unloading of vehicles. The NPPF states that development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or the residual cumulative impacts on the road networks would be severe. It is considered that it has not been adequately demonstrated that the impact on the existing highway network would be acceptable given the existing state of pressure on the highway network and the capacity of nearby road junction. This weighs significantly against the proposal. The following points have been added within the addendum. The planning obligations request from Warwickshire County Council Education has been reduced to £194,029 for the provision towards secondary education. Page 18 of the agenda references 105 dwellings. This is incorrect and should be amended to read 70 dwellings. A total of 18 neighbour responses have been received from 16 addresses, and the Ancient Monument Society has been consulted on this application but was missed on the original report. So to conclude, the NPPF promotes a presumption in favour of sustainable development and in line with the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 states that decisions should be made in line with the adopted development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. There are several key material considerations, not least the principle of the development, the impact on highway safety and the impact on the historic landscape, as well as the inspector's appeal dismissal on this site, which all weigh significantly against the proposal. There are some positives to the scheme, including the provision of housing and affordable housing, as well as other planning obligations which weigh in favour of the application. However, it is on balance that it is considered that while there are clear considerations which weigh in favour of the proposal, those against it outweigh any positives. The recommendation is therefore one of refusal for the reasons as listed within the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a speaker on this item as well as a written statement from the council. We'll go to our objector who is here tonight, and that's Mr. Maycock. So, Mr. Maycock, he's not here. Has he submitted a statement in writing? Okay. In that case, then we'll go to the written statement from Councillor Mandy Tromans.
This is a statement from Councillor Mandy Tromans in respect of planning application, rear of Tunnel Road, site reference 46A010. In my capacity as ward councillor, I have had many discussions with rightly concerned residents, and after visiting Tunnel Road and looking carefully at the application, I would like to make the following comments for the committee's consideration. This application has taken a great deal of time to consider, given the problems contained within, and I believe that the various subsequent amendments to the original application still do not address initial problems sufficiently. The site is acknowledged as of historic value as it contains ancient ridge and furrow land. Any form of development would mean this would be completely lost. Indeed, some activities on the land show a complete disregard and have already damaged this historic landscape. Current traffic modelling relied upon does not adequately reflect the traffic movements in the area of Tunnel Road. There has been significant building works in the general area which has increased traffic considerably. There is no capacity on the public highway network in Galley Common to support the anticipated level of additional vehicle movement safety. The Plough Hill Road, Coles Hill Road junction is a significant bottleneck, and recent studies indicate it is operating above capacity during peak times. The proposed access layout to the site is insufficient for both large construction vehicles initially and then service vehicles such as refuse vehicles, delivery vehicles, and emergency vehicles. The junction is not wide enough to accommodate safe manoeuvring and will be detrimental to highway safety. In the case of refuse vehicles, the driver has to commit to a manoeuvre before being able to see if it is safe to do so. The dwellings either side of the junction obstruct into visibility. Additional residential properties will give rise to an increase in parking in the area. The plans appear to show parallel parking bays on the opposite side of Tunnel Road to the existing dwellings, with bollards to prevent footway parking. This would not stop parking on carriageway. Residents and visitors may still park on carriageway in preference to using the parallel parking bays or when the parallel parking is full. And it is easier to load and unload fronting your property rather than crossing a road which can be very busy with traffic routinely travelling over the speed limit. I ask the committee to consider the comments above and the views of the local residents and officers and make the only reasonable decision to refuse planning permission.
Thank you. Can I just check that Mr. Maycock hasn't shown up since that's been going on? No. Okay, in that case, we will move then to the recommendations. The recommendation before us this evening is to recommend a resolution to refuse planning permission and defend the appeal against non-determination on that basis for the reasons as printed in your agendas. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Wilson, and a seconder, Councillor Cape. Okay, so I'll now open the floor to discussion. Do I have any members? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm actually pleased to see the recommendation as printed. I am disappointed that we haven't been able to deal with it within time. It's had to go on non-determination, but as myself and Councillor Smith well know as members of the Cabinet, the recruitment is particularly difficult to the planning department at the moment, and it's resulted in the non-determination through no real fault of our own. It's just been the market for recruitment, unfortunately. Knowing the pattern of development over on that side of Nuneaton and the amount of development, particularly off of Plough Hill Road, I am pleased that finally the County Council have recognised that Plough Hill Road is over capacity, and that they have actually weighed in with an objection on the basis of highways. It's unusual actually to get county highways to refuse, in my experience, on the planning committee after all these years. And when we finally get that refusal, I think we should be very mindful of that, because it takes a lot to get a refusal out of highways, in my experience, and actually for it to tally with local knowledge for a change. Because as local people, as local councillors, we are still local residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth, and we are the eyes and ears of the council there as well. So I am fully behind the recommendation to refuse, because there are elements on Plough Hill Road, and I've said it on planning committees before, you literally would struggle to get a cigarette paper between some of the cars on Plough Hill Road on certain stretches, and this would only add to the problems that residents and other drivers already face on that stretch of road in the borough. So I believe that we should go with the recommendation as printed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Winston. Any other members? No, in that case, we will move directly to the vote. So all those in favour of the motion? Okay, I think that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and if we can go to our second item, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, this is item 2, site 51A 073 Abbey Street, reference number 0039096. This application is for a non-material amendment, for an amendment in the planning permission for the approved application 037658. Within this application were a number of parameter plans which set out the minimum and maximum deviations for the external parameters for the proposed buildings. This application is to change those parameters, so through the subsequent submission of reserved matters, greater flexibility in design can be achieved. This application is being reported to the committee as it is a non-material amendment for a major application, and the council is the applicant. The assessment must be made for an application of this type is whether or not the changes are non-material. A non-material amendment is not an application for planning permission, and so local planning authorities have discretion in whether consultees and neighbours are consulted. In this case, it was not considered any consultation was necessary. The two plots that are involved in this within the approved parameter application are plot 1A and plot 2. The parameters and dimensions of these plots in the original application are set out in the assessment within the agenda report. They can also be seen on this slide. The proposed amendments to parameters are seen on screen and are set in more detail in the report. The revised parameters at plot 1A, which you see on screen, are to provide additional flexibility for parts of the north, south, east and west elevations of the building at plot 1A, and the vertical parameters for both the eaves and ridge heights of plot 1A. Explanations for the changes are outlined in the report, and the changes to plot 1A are not considered to be changes that would have a significant impact on the visual amenity, and officers have concluded that they would not significantly or materially change the overall appearance of the approved scheme. Therefore, it was concluded that the changes to plot 1A are considered a non-material. The revised parameters for plot 2 are the horizontal parameters of the east and south elevations of the proposed buildings. The changes to plot 2 are explained in more detail in paragraph 5 of the appraisal section of the report. Explanations for the changes are outlined in the report and are seen on screen. The changes to plot 2 are not considered to be changes that would constitute a material change. Therefore, it was concluded that the changes to plot 2 are considered non-material. The horizontal parameters of the east... Oh no, sorry, that's one. Sorry. So in conclusion, there are no amendments items for the application, and it is recommended to confirm that the proposed amendments are accepted as a non-material amendment to the original planning permission 037658. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. I have one speaker on this item, and that's Councillor Conticore, who I believe is speaking in objection. Councillor Conticore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm speaking an objection, basically because we don't know the final layout of this site. We're starting to move the building sideways up to 3 metres. On the plans, it doesn't even say what's 1A and 2, which is really regrettable if you look on page 43 and 42. But clearly, the site has no access for cyclists at the moment. The cyclists are expected to go round the outside of the site. And the bus shelter is marked. If you look at page 42, the bus shelter is way up on Rowan Ringway. And we do not know how pedestrians are going to get to the cinema and go in and out various buildings on this site. And we don't know on which side of the buildings there's going to be the cycle racks. And it's incredible. We haven't got a master plan for the site, which actually shows the walking routes from the bus stops and the cycle route you'd expect to get walking your bike, I assume, because it's a no cycling area, into wherever the cycle racks are for the cinema. So while we're moving all these buildings around, surely we need to know where the cyclists and where the pedestrians are going, because it says 97 metres these buildings are going to be high. That's rubbish, because that's above sea level. What you haven't told us is how high the ground is. But these are quite tall buildings, some of them, so I'm really concerned that we don't have a really decent master plan for the site before we're allowing these buildings to be moved a few metres this way, a few metres that way. And this is important because we can actually have quite narrow, tall corridors. You may say 1 or 2 metres is immaterial, but if you're expecting people to walk from the bus stop, wherever they are, through gaps between buildings, it really matters where the buildings are. And I don't want you to object to this application as much as defer it to actually have a diagram of where the walking, cycling routes and bus shelters are, so we actually build something decent and not have the problem where we're building. It's the same as up the Longshoot. We've got lots of piecemeal developments. Each building will have its own planning application within the red line of that building. But unless we get the master plan right in terms of the walking routes and cycling routes and where the bus shelters are, and I said there's only one marked on the diagram on page 42, and that's in a crazy place right up the top. I expect people would be expected to walk down the cycle lane and in where that pedestrian crossing is. I say there's just not enough data, and I would like legal advice about the leader of the council who's signing off all these developments as to whether he's allowed to vote on this matter, because I think we need more transparency. We need to reverse the idea there's no cycling in here. We obviously don't want cycling everywhere, but we need to actually have a safe cycling route, because otherwise we're going to have people walking down Rowan Ringway from the bus, cycling down Rowan Ringway, and then cycling across the entrance to the multi-storey car park. This is total nuts. We need a master plan for the site with sustainable access on. So I ask you to defer this till the officers get back with a decent plan of the site saying where everyone's going. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Could I just ask members if anyone has any points of clarification they wish to raise with Councillor Condacor, anything he said? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. On what basis do you believe I have made a predetermination of this application?
Thank you, Chair. I don't believe you predetermined it as much as you've got an interest as leader of the council signing off these various developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Would Councillor Condacor not agree that every councillor indeed has an interest in the stake of the Abbey Street development, because it is the prime regeneration area in Nuneaton and Bedworth at the moment? So we all have a view on it or a predisposition to it. So either one has to stand out or all 34 councillors have to stand out, in which case no one will be able to determine the planning application. Which is it, Councillor Condacor?
I believe it is just the person signing off the contracts and the leader of the council, as your project, effectively. Now you've taken it over from the previous administration. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wilson.
On what basis am I signing any contract? As Councillor Condacor well knows, I have no authority to sign any contract. I am not the proper officer of this authority. So yet again, will Councillor Condacor apologise for deliberately misleading councillors and members of the audience, because it is clearly not true. And I will state for the record, Chair, that I have not been consulted by officers on this particular planning application. It would not be appropriate for them to do so. It is an operational matter, not strategic. And that is where I sit, Chair. I sit at the strategic level. And I may disagree with this planning application, I may not, but Councillor Condacor seems to be singling me out to meet his conspiracy theory. So which is it? Am I a proper officer or am I an elected councillor? Does he understand the difference?
Thank you. I was talking to the applicant and they said a political decision was taken not to allow cycling on the site. Therefore, I believe this is a politically controlled development.
I'm going to wade in here, I think, at this point, because we're just having a back and forth and we're not actually addressing the issues in front of us. I take your point, Councillor Wilson. You know, I'm satisfied that there is no predetermination here on your part. I appreciate also that as a councillor for Nuneaton, in particular, you are going to have an interest, as would every councillor. But that interest, I don't think, has been tainted or tampered with by external influences. And I think that's what we have to consider here, that the fact is you're going to base your decision solely on the facts that we have in front of us here tonight. Councillor Condacourt, I think we have to be very, very careful about what we're saying in terms of allegations against other councillors, as here is not to do a backwards and forwards and to have a political debate here, as is to literally try to judge and ascertain what the way forward is in terms of planning applications. So I would ask, please, that you could be mindful of that. You know, save that for full council. Okay, that's the sort of the proper place for it, not here. So I think you've had your answers to your questions. I'm concerned that there's no predetermination. That's my overriding concern as chair of this application committee. And I think Councillor Wilson will make an unbiased judgment based on the facts as they stand. So with that in mind then, I'd like to ask, do I have a proposal for recommendation to confirm the proposed amendments as accepted as a non-material amendment to Planning Commission? So Councillor Smith, okay, as proposer, and seconder, Councillor Hartshorn. Okay, I'll now open the floor for debate. So any members on this one? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to the comments of Councillor Condacourt with a great degree of interest, because he should be aware, as a councillor, and I believe all councillors should be aware, that there is indeed an indicative plan of what the site would look like. Of course, it can only be indicative because at this stage there is no final overall signed off plan, because we have to deal with this as a two-stage solution, effectively. The first is the outline planning application for the whole site, and then secondly, it is for detailed planning application as and when further buildings are ready to be erected. That is a sensible and logical approach to take, especially as we do not want to commit ourselves as a council financially, or indeed in terms of overwhelming planning officers with additional planning applications, until such time as we have a partner signed and on board, ready to deliver a particular unit as it stands, and they may have particular requirements for those individual buildings depending on the type of usage they are. At one point there was talk of an educational facility, at another point there was talk of a health facility. Now both would clearly have different needs in terms of the physical building. So it makes eminent sense to me that we approach them as and when they are ready to come forward and we have a guaranteed partner so that we can actually deliver them. That is standard operating practice. As and when we get to the finer details, probably about the car parking element, I would imagine, because there will be a multi-storey car park which is proposed for the site as well, that is probably when more details would come forward. I'm not prejudging, it's when I would assume that more details would come forward about cycle provision and storage there. So I'm not concerned at the moment about this being an improper way of planning. In fact, to me, it's quite a sensible and cautious approach to safeguard council resources until we actually need to commit them. In terms of the actual application in front of us, it is, as far as I can tell from what officers have presented, very minor elevational changes to the two particular units, and therefore I don't see why it would need a whole massive new planning application to determine that. The only reason we're here, other than officers dealing with it, is because it is an application on council-owned land. Otherwise, this would have gone through under delegated officer powers, quite rightly so. But there has to be an element of transparency and being seen to be open, because it is council land, and I get that. It's just unfortunate that it's had to use officer time, which could have been better spent elsewhere, dealing with perhaps a non-determined planning application that we just dealt with before. So I endorse the recommendation. It is a non-material amendment. It isn't a significant change. Let's just get on with it and let the planning officers do some real planning.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other members? Okay, so I'm just going to come back to Councillor Condacor's point, because obviously, I know you're passionate about your cycling routes. It's not a no at this stage, is it? You've sat on planning yourself, so you know the various hoops and stages that we have to jump through. Okay, so this is something I'm sure which will be returned to at a later date. As we know, there's going to be much more to come in terms of this discussion. So although this is only that first step, as you know, it's an overview. It's that's what the first step is. And as you know, as we delve into this, the detail begins to emerge later on. And I'm sure and confident that's what we will see as this unfolds over the coming months. So with that in mind, if I have no other speakers, I'm happy to move to a vote. So all those in favour of the recommendation? Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you. And when you're ready, we'll move to our third item.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a single-storey rear side extension to the ATAC Snooker Club. These are photos of other sites as it is, and here are some the red line plan and the site and a plan on the left showing the proposed extension to the existing snooker club. This proposal is being reported to the committee as we received 5 neighbour objections and a consultee objections with the details outlined in the report. There are often 4 main issues to consider as part of this application: the impact on residential and visual amenity, the impact on the railway network, and the impact on highway safety. The impact on the residential amenity of the adjacent neighbouring properties is acceptable, as the proposal does meet all distance standards set out in the SPD to all properties that directly face a snooker club. Furthermore, the Nuneaton Bedworth Borough Council Environmental Health were also consulted and they had no objection to the application. The impact on visual amenity is acceptable, as the extension is majority to the rear and is only single storey. So the impact on the street scene is minimal, and the extension is in harmony with the design, character, and layout of the property. The proposed roof is flat and is consistent with the existing flat roof elements of the current roof at the snooker club. Thirdly, the impact on the railway network is acceptable with the conditions 4, 5, 6, and 7 after Network Rail were consulted as part of this application. Warwickshire Highways were consulted on the application and they did object to the proposal. However, due to the reasons outlined in the report, the objection from Highways was not upheld and the impact on highway safety was deemed acceptable. There is one addendum item for this application, as in paragraph 2 of the impact on visual amenity, an outbuilding was referred to, and the proposal is for a rear extension, and this was incorrect. Finally, the recommendation for this application is to approve the application subject to the conditions laid out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have one speaker on this, and that's Mr. Sean Smith, who's speaking, I believe, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Ian White. Okay, so you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay. Hi, my name's Sean Smith. I am the agent acting on behalf of Ian White. They just wanted to pass the following statement in response to the concerns that were raised during the public consultation. The client notes that concerns raised during the public consultation in respect of the potential increase in parking requirements for the proposed extension, and would advise that whilst the proposals do increase the floor area of the existing building, the proposed scheme is only seeking to offer an additional 2 pool tables and improve access around their existing snooker match tables. Apart from use for league matches, a majority of the pool table use tends to be either students from nearby King Edward's College throughout the weekdays or members waiting for a snooker table to become available. As such, it is not anticipated that this would generate a significant increase in parking requirements for the club. The client acknowledges that parking on the current site is limited and existing site constraints do not afford the provision of any additional parking within the proposed scheme, but would request their close proximity to the existing public car park facilities on the opposite side of Leicester Road be taken into consideration when determining the application. They also note that the existing vacant land immediately adjacent to the club is currently being converted to a pay and display car parking facility. I would also like to make it known that they would actively encourage their members to be respectful of the surrounding neighbourhood properties and will be supportive of any scheme which may limit the future use of on-street parking by non-residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other speakers on that, so we'll move to recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions as printed. Do I have a proposer? Okay, thank you, Councillor Cape, and a seconder. Okay, Councillor Harbison. Okay, I shall now open the floor to any members. Councillor Wilson.
Can I ask a question of officers, please? Because just by chance, I happened to drive past this on my way to work this morning. Well, this afternoon, actually. I was elsewhere in the morning. But is this a retrospective planning application, or is this a new application, a fresh application? Because when I drove past, there appeared to be building works actually on the site, on the car park. So before I make any... I do have some further comments, but I generally don't like retrospective planning applications because it tends to imply that people think they're either going to get it or they can get away with it, which goes against my sense of natural justice. So could someone please confirm whether that is the case?
I don't know, Mr Smith, if you can confirm that at all.
It's not a retrospective application, so I wasn't aware of any building works that were going on, if I'm being bluntly honest. So. Okay,
any officers know of anything at all?
No, as far as we know, it's not retrospective. When I did a site visit, this from what I was told, this area on the left behind was where it was going to be. So, if building work started, then since that point, but it wasn't retrospective from the start. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
There's work going on at the side of the building when I drove past earlier, as I look at it on the left-hand side. But I'll take it at face value, it isn't retrospective, but it doesn't... I do have reservations about this application, if I'm honest, Chair, and I accept that planning officers do have a balance to weigh up, but I actually agree with Highways on this, that taking away area of the car park to facilitate this, it isn't just about any additional users, it's about the existing users too. You come down Leicester Road Bridge as you're coming from St Nick's and you turn left. It is a very, very tight left as you go in and then down Wheat Street, Orchard Street and round King Edward Road. And if there is additional car parking there, because car parking spaces have been removed from this site, it will make the visibility display and the manoeuvrability on that very tight corner very, very difficult. And I did it this morning, which is why I think about it. So I accept that there are car parks over the road, but we all know people will park closest to the utility they want to use. It's human nature. So I'm not necessarily convinced that there will be this supposed modal shift that everyone talks about in planning terms, especially when a lot of this is late at night and people don't necessarily want to have to cross the road or travel over the road in a dark night. So I have to respectfully disagree with officers on this, because I do think that in that particular area, as you come around, it is a very tight left turn, and I think any more parking on that junction would be dangerous, and therefore I agree with the County Council recommendation, and if it falls, Chair, I would actually move recommendation on that basis, but I cannot in all conscience vote for it in its current form.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other members who wish to speak on this matter? No, in that case, I will go to the vote. All those in favour of recommending planning permission? Okay. Against? And abstentions? Okay, so that is approved then. Okay, you're free to leave, Mr Smith, if you so wish. Okay, when you're ready then, we'll go to item number 4, please.
This application seeks approval for the proposed erection of 3 dwellings on the land to the rear of 235 The Long Shoot. Originally 4 dwellings were applied for, however during the process the number of dwellings was reduced down to 3. The scheme is being recommended for refusal to committee today due to the following reasons. The proposal is contrary to policy BE3 of the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Plan, in that the application for 3 dwellings would not create a cohesive group or reflect the pattern of development within the area. This results in a development which is incongruous and out of keeping with the character and appearance of the surrounding area. This is contrary to section 13.9 of the Sustainable Design and Construction SPD 2020. The scheme does not meet the required separation distances as specified in the Sustainable Design and Construction SPD. The distance between ground and first floor habitable room windows between plot 1 and the blank wall of plot 3 does not meet the minimum prescribed distance standards as detailed within paragraph 11.6 of the Sustainable Design and Construction SPD. Finally, the scheme fails to meet waste collection and storage requirements, especially in terms of drag distances from the dwellings to the road frontage of the Long Shoot. No bin stores are proposed for the new dwellings, and it has not been demonstrated that there is adequate space within the site for a refuse vehicle to enter onto the site. This is contrary to section 11.22 onwards of the SPD for Sustainable Design and Construction. There are no addendum items for this application.
Thank you very much. I have one objector who wishes to speak, and that's Mrs. Hudson. So, Mrs. Hudson, you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
I live at 233 The Long Shoot, which is next door to the application site. I have lived there for the past 43 years with my late husband, and we have raised our family there. This planning application is quite simply backland development, and it should not be allowed. It is a greedy garden grab. It will ruin the character of this part of the Long Shoot and cause significant harm to the amenity of my property. It will also cause significant harm to the amenity of the other immediate neighbouring properties along this part of the Long Shoot. And the positioning of the upstairs windows of the proposed dwellings overlook my property, that will cause a severe intrusion into my privacy. The character of the Long Shoot is clearly ribbon development. This proposed application is clearly not ribbon development. It is therefore totally out of character of this part of the Long Shoot, and this is a material planning consideration that councillors cannot ignore. The backland nature of this application will have a severe and adverse impact upon the character of the area, in particular on the amenity of my property and on the other properties adjacent to the application site. Conversely, this planning application will provide only a minimal and almost negligible benefit towards meeting the council's housing supply. These very few additional dwellings are not needed. The benefits of this planning application do not outweigh the harm to the character of the area, harm to amenity, and harm to trees and wildlife. Therefore, this planning application should be refused. This planning application requires the removal of several very mature and beautiful trees within the back garden of the application site. My family and I have enjoyed looking out of our back windows on these trees every day over the past 43 years of living next door. These trees are now very mature and offer a very real, significant amenity value to myself and all of my immediate neighbours. These trees are worthy of a tree preservation order for their intrinsic beauty and for the contribution to the immediate landscape. Additionally, they serve to screen eyesore of any future development. Furthermore, they provide an important habitat to local wildlife, including many bats in the area. These trees most definitely warrant a tree preservation order. I see no evidence that the local tree officer has made any visit to this site to assess the trees that will otherwise be removed and destroyed. I therefore plead to all councillors this evening that a planning decision is deferred until the council's tree officer has visited this site and formally assessed the beauty and amenity value of these trees that are proposed to be destroyed, and that the tree officer has had opportunity to place a preservation order on all those.
Mrs Hudson, you've gone over your 3 minutes, so could you please just summarise in a sentence any last points? My apologies.
I think I'll just, well, I've not got that long to read, that much to read.
If it's a matter of just a couple of sentences, that's fine, but just to be fair, we have to try and stick within the times if possible.
Okay, the property values of 233 and 237 will be severely affected by the new development. It is also noted that the site plans do not appear to be digitally drawn and no topographical survey appears to have been done. This raises a concern as to whether the layout plan is accurate and to scale.
Thank you very much, Mrs Hudson. I'm going to now ask, are there any points of clarification? Mrs Hudson, could you just turn off your microphone, just press the large button? Lovely, thank you. Does any council have any points of clarification they wish to ask? No? Okay, in that case then, we have a motion in front of us then to recommend refusal of planning permission for the reasons as printed. Do I have anyone who's willing to propose? Councillor Markham and Councillor Smith, are you happy to second? Okay, thank you. So I'll open the floor now for any members. Do I have any members who wish to speak on this matter? Okay, in that case, we will move straight to the vote then. All those in favour of the proposal to refuse planning permission? Against? Abstentions? Okay, one abstention. Okay, so refusal has been given. Okay, so Mr Hudson, it's up to you. You are entirely welcome to stay for the rest of proceedings, or you may leave if you wish. No problem at all. Okay, and we'll move on to the next item when we're ready, please.
This application is for a block of 6 flats, 3 one-bedroom and 3 two-bedroom over 3 floors in a pitched roof building located adjacent to and south of the existing Sainsbury's local store in Exhall. The proposed building has front and rear gables and dormer windows and off-white rendering. A hot food takeaway is incorporated into the ground floor and front elevation. It also includes provision of a new vehicular access route following the southern edge of the site to provide access to the rear, where additional parking is proposed for both the flats and the supermarket. A pedestrian footpath is also proposed to be provided on the edge of the site. This application is being recommended for refusal because the proposal is contrary to policies BE3 and HS2 of the Borough Plan and paragraph 111 of the MPPF, in that it has not been adequately demonstrated that the site can be made suitable for access and manoeuvring by the types of vehicles required by such uses. Furthermore, insufficient parking provision is proposed to be provided on the site. As a result, there will be a severe impact on highway safety contrary to section 5.2 and 5.3 of the Transport Demand Matters SPD and the guidance contained within Manual for Streets. The application is being refused because it appears there is insufficient car parking for HGVs, which would service Sainsbury's as well as the hot food takeaway, and also the flats for most likely larger household items which may be delivered and taken from the site. And there is also insufficient space within the site for HGVs to manoeuvre without impacting the highway, meaning the vehicles may end up reversing out of the site, which, given the number of potential deliveries, is not likely to be acceptable. Therefore, it has not been adequately demonstrated that the site can be made suitable for access and manoeuvring by the types of vehicles required by such uses. Furthermore, insufficient parking provision is proposed to be provided on the site. As a result, there will be a severe impact on highway safety, contrary to section 5.2 and 5.3 of the Transport Demand Matters SPD. In terms of the addendum items, there are proposed windows at first floor level and above, and in most cases these windows are located over 7 metres from the boundary with neighbouring gardens. However, there is one instance in which 2 windows are located approximately 6.5 metres from the boundary, which is 0.5 metres short of the 7 metre minimum recommended in the SPD. On balance, however, the scheme is largely compliant with the distance standards as set out within the SPD. Further to this, please note that 14 objections from 8 addresses and 2 objections with no addresses have been counted as the final total, whilst the agenda says that there are 10 objections from 8 addresses and 3 objections with no address, so please discount this from the agenda. Finally, please note, based on the latest set of plans submitted with a reduction in the number of flats, all units now comply with the minimum space standards.
Thank you. I've got several speakers on, a couple of speakers on this item, so I'll go to Councillor Brown, who is the local ward councillor first.
Thank you. I'm here to ask you to support the recommendation to refuse this application. The planned development is quite simply over-intensive and insensitive to the site that it sits on. As we've heard, it fails to satisfy the requirements of this council in terms of impact on residential amenity. That's quite finely balanced. But mainly it fails to satisfy our requirements in terms of highway safety. That is well covered in the agenda. I know this site, I've visited it regularly, and I can say from experience that there's considerable problems already accessing and egressing this site. Traffic quite frequently queues on Coventry Road waiting for somebody to get off the site so people can get onto the site to park. And manoeuvring around the site is already tight. It may be deemed to be adequate, but that presumes everybody drives tiny little smart cars or things like that. Reality is people drive larger cars, SUVs and things, and it is tight. So there is definitely an issue there. I've witnessed a couple of near misses there where people have literally tried to pass parked cars. It's adjacent to the entrance to Bayton Road Industrial Estate on the other side, which at peak times is another bottleneck. So we do have issues there. I mean, there may well be an acceptable development plan for this site. The application before you tonight is not it. So I would exhort you really to refuse this one, and it's down to the applicants to come up with a suitable alternative proposal that better uses the site that meets our requirements. It's not for us to accept something that's not acceptable that's put before us. So I would urge you to follow the officer's recommendation in this case and refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Just before I move on to our next speaker, does anyone have any points of clarification they'd like to raise? No? Okay, in that case, I'll move on to our next speaker, and that's Zoe Macy, who is part of Hayward's Architects, and I believe represents the agent.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In May 2019, Hayward Architects were approached by the applicants to design a development for residential use and hot food takeaway. Pre-application advice had been received from the council based on a scheme produced by a different designer. The original design presented at pre-app was for 2 blocks, each 3 stories high, with 14 apartments in total and a hot food takeaway. The pre-app feedback was that the principle of residential development on the site is acceptable, but the proposed scheme was considered overdevelopment of the site. Highways did not offer a response. We addressed the above concerns in our application by first reducing the scale of the rear block and then removing it altogether. We reduced the height of the front block so it's a similar height to the surrounding houses, and we remodelled the front block to comply with overlooking distances. A sequential test was also submitted justifying the use of the site for a hot food takeaway. We wish to raise the following points to committee. The site is in a sustainable location, surrounded by housing, directly next door to a convenience store, within 150 metres of 3 bus stops and within 300 metres of an employment site. The scheme has been significantly reduced in scale from 9 flats to 6 following feedback from local residents and highways. Further feedback from the council and highways resulted in reducing the total number of flats to 6 to providing undercroft parking. All the flats either meet or exceed the minimum space standards. We've satisfied all the points raised by the planning officer, and the only reason for refusal now is on highways grounds. Several times in the last 3 years, we've approached a point where we've believed approval will be granted, only for another reason for refusal on highways grounds to be raised. Since the initial submission, we've received 10 objection letters from highways. They've requested justification for the number of parking spaces, a service delivery plan, a parking survey and vehicle tracking, all of which have been provided. In the most recent objection, highways have chosen to disregard the parking survey that was carried out on site on Tuesday the 10th of May. The reason for disregarding the survey is that it was done on a Tuesday and not at a weekend. Instead, the highways officer referred to parking surveys carried out on a Thursday at a store in Bradford and on a Friday at a store in Norwich. We argue that a survey done on the site to which the application relates is more relevant than a survey carried out on a site over 120 miles away, regardless of the day on which the survey is carried out. The delivery for Sainsbury's is to remain as it is at the moment. There's no alteration proposed to that, and delivery for the chip shop would be via the turning area in the rear of the car park. In conclusion, this application has been with the council for over 3 years and has been assessed by 5 different planning officers, all of whom offered different advice. Through discussions with several of the planning officers, the design has been amended to reduce the number of units, increase the parking provision and satisfy the minimum space standards. The proposal makes a positive use of the land to the rear of Sainsbury's, which has fallen into decay and been subject to antisocial behaviour in the past. The design ensures that new life can be brought into this area, as well as providing much-needed housing at the starter homes end of the market. The applicants are long-standing members of the community and the owners of the adjacent Sainsbury's local. They are completely engaged with local residents and want to provide a development that benefits the community which they are part of. They are happy to agree to conditions proposed by environmental health relating to noise and odour. Through the approval of this design, 6 new high-quality dwellings can be added to the national housing stock, as well as high-quality food for the local community. We believe that over the last 3 years, we've produced a design that works for the applicant and the wider community, whilst complying with planning policy and guidance. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask, do any members require any points of clarification? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about the studies in Bradford and Norwich, I think you said. Have you actually supplied a revised study as requested by County Council on the Sunday or not?
No, because we were at round 10 of going back and forth with highways. So we decided that enough was enough and we'd bring it to committee.
Okay, I have a question as well regarding the proximity to the boundary of 2 windows, because you said you'd resolved all the problems, yet it clearly states that there's a 6.5 metre gap from the windows to the boundary, and that's sort of half a metre short of what it should be. Has that been sort of rectified now?
Those windows are bathroom windows, so they can be obscure glazed and fixed.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any other members? No? Okay, so we have a recommendation to refuse permission. So do I have a proposer and a seconder to move so we can enable the discussion? So Councillor Smith is proposing and a seconder, Councillor Harbison. Thank you. Do I have any members who wish to speak on this matter? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned that if the reason for refusal is on the basis that County Council have used studies from Bradford and Bristol and Norwich, if this goes to appeal, would an independent inspector find that to be adequate or not? Given that, as far as I can tell, Bristol and Norwich have nothing in common with Nuneaton or Bedworth. Now, it may be that this study which the applicant has presented still indicates that this is an inappropriate development. But I would prefer to have advice from County Council on the basis of the study which the applicant provided, which is in Bedworth, and if the recommendation still comes out as the recommendation, then we have to face that consequence. But I am very concerned, Chair, that if we were to refuse and the inspector was to find us unreasonable on the grounds that we have used that data, we could be liable for some not insignificant costs. So, without prejudging how I would intend to vote, because I do have reservations about this site and I can see where Councillor Brown is concerned, I just want to make sure that if that is the route committee goes down, it is a rock solid reason. So could I move deferral to seek further advice and clarification from County Council, and for them to confirm and use that study from the Thursday, I think you said, the applicant said, Tuesday, sorry. You mentioned a number of days, but I just want to make sure that we are covered if that is the way we go down. If not, then we have to face the consequences.
So in terms of the way in which the data was gathered using different geographical locations which are out of proximity from Nuneaton is a valid question. We would need to reconsult with Highways to get their justification as to how they have gathered their data. They use tricks, which is like, it's the way that they calculate the number of movements to and from a site. We would need to get that clarified from them in a statement in order to proceed forward for that purpose. It's not something that we would be able to answer in the planning department.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilson. I was just going to ask, do I have any other councillors or members that wish to speak on this matter at all? If not, I'm going to come back to what Councillor Wilson has proposed. Councillor, if you're happy to propose that, okay, I'm happy to second that. And I'll put that to our membership. So all those in favour then of deferring, so it can be put back to Warwickshire County Council. Okay, so that is unanimous, so that is deferred. Okay, and when we're ready then, we'll have the next item.
This is item 6, planning reference number 038846. This proposal is for prior approval for the installation of a 15-metre phase 8 monopole with wraparound base cabinet plus associated equipment and cabinets. The location of this monopole is within the grass verge on the junction of Newtown Road and Croft Road in Bedworth. Planning Committee is recommended to confirm that prior approval is required and granted. The key consideration with this prior approval is whether the siting and appearance of the development is acceptable. The MPPF states that advanced, high quality and reliable communications infrastructure is essential for economic growth and social well-being. Planning policies and decisions should support the expansion of electronic communication networks, including next generation mobile technology, such as 5G and full fibre broadband connections. The proposed site for this mast is in the grass verge on Newton Road, close to the junction of Croft Road. The street scene is mostly residential in nature. To the north of the site is the A444 and the Slit Road, and to the northwest is a park. Within the grass verge, there is an existing street furniture, including a street light, directional signs, and electricity boxes. The siting of the mast has been amended since the application was originally submitted. The siting is to be located closer to the existing electrical boxes found within the grass verge. In turn, this has moved the mast away from the windows of residential properties, avoiding a direct view with the mast. In determining the site of the mast, a sequential test, as outlined in the MPPF, was adopted by the application. The following search criteria was adopted. Firstly, consideration is given to sharing an existing telecommunication structure in the immediate area. Secondly, consideration is given to utilising suitable existing structures or buildings. And thirdly, sites for freestanding ground-based installations are investigated. In this case, it was not possible to share any existing structures or buildings. A total of 8 sites were reviewed for the siting of the mast, but were dismissed for various reasons. The current siting has therefore been found to be the best in terms of network coverage, whilst minimising the visual intrusion on the street scene. Furthermore, Warwickshire County Council Highways were consulted and responded with no objection to the proposal. It is considered that the siting of the mast is acceptable. The other key consideration is appearance. The very nature of installing new 5G mast infrastructure within such an urban setting requires a highly considered balance between the need to extend practical coverage reach with that of increasing risk of visual amenity intrusion. The MPPF attached great importance to the design of the built environment. At the same time, planning policies and decisions should support the expansion of electronic communication networks. Therefore, there must be a balance between extending next generation mobile technology while not causing any detrimental harm to the amenities of the area. It is acknowledged that although the mast itself is quite tall at 50 metres, this has been kept to the minimum height whilst providing sufficient network coverage. Monopoles themselves are thin, and it is unlikely that it will cause a significant loss of light to neighbouring properties or result in a sense of enclosure. The amended siting of the mast will be positioned closer to existing electrical boxes contained within the grass verge. The amended position has also moved the mast away from the windows of residential dwellings. The appearance of the mast has been designed to be camouflaged and is proposed to be finished in a fur green colour. On balance, it is considered that the appearance of the mast is acceptable. The developer has confirmed that the proposed mast is ICNIRP compliant. The ICNIRP guidelines give general recommendations regarding radio frequency electromagnetic field exposure. It confirms that 5G exposure will not cause any harm to health, providing they adhere to the guidelines. Therefore, the proposal is compliant with the requirement of the General Permitted Development Order under Part 16, Class A. The proposed siting and appearance of the mast on balance is found to be acceptable. The recommendation is that prior approval is required and granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have several speakers on this, so I'm going to go to the first of those, who is Carol Lee. Do we have Carol Lee here? First? No. Okay, this next one that I've got on my list is Mr. Bradley Tolchard. Mr. Tolchard, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
There has been 43 objections gathered from the community and many requests for further information. All of these objections and requests have been ignored according to the appraisal contained in this agenda. The council states there are only 2 key issues, siting and appearance. The council appraisal then goes on to ignore those 2 key issues as well. Appearance. The appearance of this mast will be horrific. It will add to the recent destruction of the area caused by the O2 mast that's just gone up. The MPPF states the following regarding camouflage, start quote, for new 5G networks, equipment should be sympathetically designed and camouflaged where appropriate, end quote. Therefore, consideration must be given to camouflage. Green paint is not camouflage. The mast should be camouflaged. This is sometimes called fake tree camouflaging, near tree camouflaging, or hidden in tree camouflaging. The mast needs to be sympathetically designed. There is nothing sympathetic about the design of this mast. It will look horrific and dystopian. The council's appraisal is ignoring the MPPF regarding camouflage and sympathetic design. Siting. The MPPF states the following regarding siting. Start quote. The number of masts should be kept to a minimum. Use of its existing masts should be encouraged. End quote. There is an existing O2 mast 150 metres approximately to the east of this site. At least 5 carriers can use the same mast without interference. Why is the council ignoring the MPPF that states existing masts should be used and masts should be kept to a minimum? So as well as ignoring the community's 43 objections on there, and ignoring the 2 key issues, siting and appearance, and ignoring the MPPF, recent information has also come to light. The mast will be in breach of UK GDPR regs. The mast will be in breach of Human Rights Act. The mast cannot be insured according to Lloyd's of London Insurance Group. The mast will never have a public liability insurance number. The council may receive payment from the proposer, which is a conflict of interest with the community. ICNIRP is based on 1998 telecom theory, and ICNIRP has a conflict of interest. So if it can't be insured, is in breach of 2 laws and has 2 conflicts of interest, ignores the MPPF and ignores the 2 key issues, do the planners think that's okay? Can a planner speak about this, please? For the record, I'm submitting 2 reports, a new report by Starkey showing the conflict of interest at ICNIRP, and a new report by Highland showing the inadequacy of the ICNIRP standard. I request to defer this until the 43 objections on there have been considered. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tolchard. Do I have any points of clarification that any members would like to ask? No? Sorry, Councillor Cape.
It's just a clarification on camouflage, because I'm not an expert. I have seen masts in other countries that are, shall we say, attempted to be camouflaged to look like nature. But I would actually appreciate some expert advice on what type of camouflage could be added to this to make it more pleasing without going into the health and safety side.
Yeah, I don't know if officers want to sort of give us perhaps a flavour of a kind of different camouflage, if they can. I know it's putting you on the spot slightly, but you are right in terms of it can be camouflaged to look like trees, for example, and if we go forward, that is something that we can actively discuss, and if we want to possibly condition with the application. So, I'm sorry, I know it's putting you slightly on the spot, but I don't know if you can give us any examples. Do we have any in the borough, for example?
As far as I'm aware, there aren't any other examples within our borough, so it would be something new for us. I'm not aware what other councils have done or what conditions they've imposed for that. We'd have to probably do a little bit of research if we were going to go down that route. The MPPF does state camouflage, but it doesn't really detail what that means. So I think that's sort of open to some sort of interpretation by ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All I would say, Mr. Tolchard, is you made a very eloquent statement, and I thank you for that. But you have to remember, please, that we can only consider matters from a planning perspective. If we go outside of that, okay, then we are breaking rules and laws, okay, and it won't stand up. And what will end up happening is it will go to appeal, and we'll lose on appeal. So we do have to be careful. We do read everything. We do take everything into account. I would say that. We don't ignore things, and certainly councillors here are encouraged. They're given training in terms of looking into matters that are raised and how the sort of a planning framework actually works. And I appreciate sometimes what we want as residents and what the constraints of the planning system aren't always 100% mutually compatible. But I'm afraid we can only work within the system that we're provided with. So I know how frustrating that can be. I'm sure we all do. And we've all sat there in judgment where we want to do something different and we can't. So I just want to sort of clarify that with you. I'm going to then ask, if we've got no other points for clarification, we have a recommendation to confirm. Sorry. Oh, sorry. My apologies, Councillor Evans. I'm going to go to our next speaker, which is Councillor Evans, and then we'll come back to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to speak in my capacity as the local councillor for the Bedworth Woodlands that this application is located on. The Woodlands is the most semi-rural part of the town. As set out in the National Infrastructure Strategy, the rollout of broadband to rural and hard-to-reach areas is a key priority for this government. Over 65% of the UK now has access to gigabyte-capable connections, a huge leap forward from just over 1 in 20 in January 2019. Broadband connectivity is a key issue that impacts residents on the Bedworth Woodlands. I am contacted regularly by constituents about this matter, who inform me that Zoom calls often lag, websites can take minutes to download, and phone calls are not of a good quality. I note a number of objections from a quasi-community association, although the said organisation is unable to provide me with names of its officers and their roles, so I'm not actually sure it's constituted. I also note the 43 community objections, but these are coming from residents as far as Reigate, Woking, Hartfield and Polegate, and I'm not sure what their connection is to Bedworth. I wish to refute the allegations made by the group that man-made RF radiation is harmful to wildlife and that radiation would have an impact on my constituents' health. I wish to refute these allegations to ensure that my residents do not become fearful about what lies are being spread. We must be guided by independent public health advice on radio waves. This advice is clear that exposure to electronic magnetic fields is not new, and there is no credible evidence of an impact of 5G on public health. Existing technical standards, which take into account international guidelines on research on non-ionising radiation, are expected to be followed throughout the development of 5G products and networks, and it is my view that this application follows those guidelines. Very simply, there is zero scientific evidence to demonstrate a link between 5G and public health, and the allegations quoted are nothing more than conspiracy theories. I recognise...
right, I'm sorry, Mr.
I recognise...
You've had your moment to make your points. Okay, there is no comeback. Okay, so I would ask you, please, you know, to allow Councillor... No, I'm speaking. You need to listen. I'd like to allow Councillor Evans to finish. Okay, if you have a point then, I will then listen to that point. But please allow him the courtesy to finish as he did you. Thank you.
However, I do recognise some of the frustrations from residents about the location of the mast and that it would not be in keep with the local area. However, without an objection from Warwickshire Highways, I don't believe an objection from this committee would stand at a potential inspectorate hearing. I do believe that as part of the ongoing local plan process, the planning department should consider having a design guide similar to that of Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council on the design and location of future telecommunication masts, and I hope the Cabinet member will consider that. However, I would ask the committee to consider adding a condition that the telecommunications mast and any cabinets around it be coloured dark green and that they be camouflaged as a tree so that it better blends in with the local area, as I cannot see anything in the application about colour. Can I have my extra 20 seconds? Thank you, Chair. Overall, I do understand the frustrations of residents about the location. However, balancing this with the sound economic benefits that this mast would create, I hope the committee will consider approving the application with the condition I have proposed. And if I can just show you this image of a telecommunications mast in Surrey that was approved by their planning department that was camouflaged as a tree. There is a precedent that has already been set nationally, and I hope that the council will consider that condition.
Thank you. Can I just, before I come to Mr. Tolchild, can I just ask, are there any points of clarification that any members would like? Councillor Cape.
I would just like to kind of support what Councillor Evans was talking about there, which is going back to my initial point, that I think as a council we should have a policy on exactly what will constitute adequate camouflage and put that in on conditions to try to blend it into the area. So I would like us to move that forward, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come back to that once we go to adopting the recommendations. Any other members for any points of clarification? No? Okay, Mr. Tolcher, I will allow you. I wouldn't normally. I appreciate this is your first time here. I can see, obviously, that you are slightly upset. So I will give you, in this instance, you know, a chance to make one final point. Okay, then after that, then I'm afraid you cannot take any further part in any discussion that we have. Then it goes to the members only. Thank you.
Cheers, thank you for that. Yeah, I'd just like to consider these reports on IGNIRP. There's 2 reports here from independent studies. And if you have a read of them, you'll understand that there is concern with many scientists all around the world about non-iodizing radiation. And also, just secondly, no one spoke about the siting. There's a mast 150 metres to the east. They can be used on 5 carriers can use 1 mast. It's in the MPPF to use existing masts.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tolcher. Thank you for making those additional points. Councillor Evans, quickly. What I don't want a to and fro. Okay.
Thank you. I have done my research because I know that the individual was going to quote these two reports. These are reports that are not, I repeat, not endorsed by Public Health England. We have to accept what PHE say. They are the experts, they are the medical experts, and Public Health England do not accept those conspiracy theories.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. What I would say from a planning point of view, however, is I don't believe either of those carry weight in a planning capacity. So just please bear that in mind when you're making your decisions. Although there are valid arguments within this chamber, the planning sort of policy as it is sort of doesn't really mention mention this issue in terms of health either way. Okay, so it's not really something that should be a planning or material consideration in this case. So we have a recommendation to confirm that prior approval is required and that we're going to grant that. Do I have a proposer for that? Okay, Councillor Smith, and a seconder, Councillor Hartsell. So I'll open the floor then to speakers. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was a little concerned when I found out this was going up because I was also under the impression why couldn't it go where the other one is and be part of it. But it does say in the report that there should be a separation distance to avoid interference, but it doesn't say how much that separation distance is. So I just wondered if anybody can clarify how far that is so we could just say it has to be there because of that distance.
Just to confirm, I'm not 100% sure on the actual distance. I'm relying on information I've received from the applicant themselves, and that is what they've quoted to me, is that there would be interference if the mast was any closer to the one that's already close to the slip road.
Thank you. Councillor Markham, does that answer your question? Yeah, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And before I begin, I'll state that I'm fully expecting to have these comments taken and put on some of the social media platform and creatively interspersed with pictures of the Fat Controller as they did before. And if you can't come up with anything more original, then if you think after 35 years of being bullied, I'm not after anything original, then I'd actually find that more amusing if you came up with something more original. But I won't be silenced by a pseudo community association. Now, this really concerns me, Chair, that we have a pseudo community association going around scaremongering with residents. And there are residents who do have genuine concerns, and I don't deny that, but there is no reputable evidence at all which suggests that the...
I'm sorry, but I'll have to ask members of the public to not get involved, please.
It's you who are doing the insulting, madam.
Okay, can I just say, please, that if you do intend to stay, that you need to just think about your behaviour. It's not acceptable. If not, you are more than welcome to and free to leave. I would remind you that we do have certain standards in this chamber, and I would like you to uphold them.
Maybe some other people ought to be reminded of that.
Well, you're the ones who were interrupting.
I think that's a case of the pot calling the kettle, Chair, but I think we'll continue.
Yeah, so now, Councillor Wilson.
It does genuinely concern me, Chair, that we have pseudo-community associations going around proclaiming that these things are unsafe. There is no reputable evidence, and I accept they may have found some scientists to support their theory, but the point is that most reputable information is peer-reviewed, peer-tested, and goes through a rigorous assessment, none of which has, to the best of my knowledge, corroborated their evidence. We also have scientists going around saying that COVID was a hoax. Having suffered from COVID, I can categorically tell you COVID is not a hoax, and these are the very people who were saying that, Mr. Chair. I'm promoting you before your time, Chair. We have to deal with the facts, and bearing in mind that this group actually said That the sanctuary event in Bedworth was a satanic ritual, I think tells us everything that this planning committee needs to know about the representations that we have heard.
I appreciate where you're going with this, Councillor Wilson. I really do, but I'm not sure this is really for this chamber. I think we need to try and keep ourselves on track with the application as much as possible. I appreciate tensions are running high, but we need to try and just take a step back if we may.
The reason I say this, Chair, is because people are watching this. People are seeing what is being put before the planning committee and believing that this is an acceptable representation which we should take note of and believe. And we actually have to take care, we have to be cognizant of the actual source of the information which is coming to us, and also the reliability, none of which has been proven to us. That is why I mention these things, Chair, because this is a very emotive subject we're talking about with these masts. Now, I went through all this with 4G masts about 10 years ago, as I've said in a previous committee, and we're getting the same arguments, but none of the evidence that we have had before us shows that the wavelengths used in the spectrum of these masts actually are within the range which are harmful to human tissue. None of it. But how many of us in this chamber, Chair, have a phone which is 5G enabled? I'm willing to bet that there are a significant proportion who do. So long as there is a market for 5G and people wanting to get access to the internet, and we found during COVID that actually having more access to the internet now has made us more connected than ever before and help people continue with their daily lives and their jobs and education, etc. People want these things. The reality of the situation, as I've said when we've considered these before, Chair, is that we have very limited rights to refuse these things. They are considered permitted development unless they meet some very, very tight exceptions. So our hands are tied. Now, we have to consider the application before us, and the application before us is painted that colour, so I will have to accept that. But I do believe that Councillor Evans, and to be fair to Mr Tolchard, had a point about this tree camouflage, and Councillor Cape has also mentioned, and that is something that we can take forward for the future. And I believe that Councillor Smith and I, as Cabinet members with our other hats on, can look at that. But that isn't for us to consider tonight, because we haven't got that information. But I will vote with this because there is very little alternative. But it really, really concerns me when we're dealing with these emotive subjects, Chair, that the correct information is being put out. Because once people get scared, it's very hard to actually correct them of that and disabuse them of that notion.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying in terms of the message that is put out there. I've already said it once tonight, and I'll kind of reiterate the point again a second time. But on this committee, we are bound by certain rules, and we have to follow those rules, okay? And as far as I'm aware, unless anyone can correct me, within the planning context, you know, the health consideration isn't even one. I mean, personally, I don't believe there is one. You know, I have to go with what the government is telling me and scientists who are way more knowledgeable of this. But in terms of our considerations, we need to stick to basic planning principles. And I would remind all members of that tonight when you are voting on this, because that is, you know, where if you vote the wrong way, you know, you invite you know, something to go to appeal, which could become very costly for the council if we go the wrong way. But equally, we do owe it to our residents to make sure that we consider all aspects as well of this. So, Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not to argue whether I'm going to be microwaved or being booked by Scotty or whatever. This is purely my concerns for the visual sighting and placing of this pole. And a 50-foot pole painted green is difficult to miss, and it's also difficult to camouflage. But the developer, as it says, the cabinets are at least visually the least visually intrusive option available, and the presence of the mast on the 844 slip road, there must be a separation distance, and I know this was broached by Councillor Markham, but when is it's far enough away, and when is it too close? I would like 100 metres is no less than, etc. So it's a grey area for me to say it's too close. When if this post could be moved about 50 metres away from the side of this house and around the corner, but again, it's a grey area. It's not definitive, not closer than X metres. So I would like clarification on that. And it does say also, clearly states that the authorities should not question the need for the service. Well, it's not the councillors, it's the people that are questioning the need, and we all want the best reception for telephones and computers, etc., etc. So I am in favour of the best connection, but again, just quoting from the planning and paragraph 130 of the NPPF, I think it was quoted earlier, it says that they are visually attractive as a good result of architecture, layout and appropriate and effective landscaping. What they can do with a 50-foot green pasted post to pacify that, I'm not sure. Also, item C, they are sympathetic to local character and history, including the surrounding built environment and landscape settling, while not preventing or discouraging appropriate innovation or change. Again, these are the NPPF. And paragraph 134 of the NPPF states that the villa that is not well designed should be refused, especially where it fails to reflect the local design policies and government guidance on design. So again, this is pure the visual aspect of it and where it is. And policy B3 of the MBBC Borough Plan states in part, the development proposed must contribute to the local distinctiveness and character. Well, it will be distinctive and it will be a character, a 50-foot green post. Yes, I do understand. Plus the street layout and the build form. And policy HS3 of the MBBC plan states in part, okay, that the following control criteria met: the siting and the appearance of the proposed apparatus and associated structures must seek to minimise impact on the visual amenity, character or appearance of the surrounding area. Now these are all policies, not my policies, the MBBC policies. And another one for a prominent structure in the street scene which would be visually intrusive. 50-foot pole is probably, you know, very intrusive and detrimental to the character, appearance and visual amenity of the locality. So on these wordings, purely not about being microwave zapped or beamed up by Scotty, I really can't approve this, purely for the appearance of where it is and the grey area of when is it far enough away from the other mast and when is it too near? Because moving this just around the corner, possibly, we could pacify all these visual appearances. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Councillor Cape.
What is the situation on deferring it until we find out exactly what can be camouflaged by the developer?
Right.
And what
I know I've just spoken to officers regarding a deferment, so we've got to have a decision by Friday, so we've only got until then. So obviously we do need to decide and make that decision this evening. Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, and I think we need to wind back a little bit in terms of these things are popping up all round. We always have the same discussion when they come up, and they are pretty much permitted development. So we're hard pressed to refuse them unless we've got serious grounds to do so. I think there is something we can do on some sort of design guide on camouflaging these things, but it's not for this application.
Yeah, I mean,
we can't afford for this to run out of time. And in terms of distancing from other posts, I would say the developers are the experts in that. They certainly wouldn't want to put a post up that had interference, which is the main reason for the distancing. So I'm not sure there are laid down distances, but I think we have to trust in the developer that they won't put a post where it's going to be interfering with another one. So there are difficulties with these. Everybody wants better connectivity. Nobody wants a post near where they live. I'm sorry, but the two are conflicting. And I think we have to be very careful about refusing these things on the basis of camouflage or whatever, because at appeal, almost certainly this would be allowed.
Right, so just to come back on the camouflage, like I said earlier, we haven't done anything like that previously in the borough, so I'm not entirely sure how we would condition that. The other thing I'm not sure of in terms of camouflage to make it look like a tree, that would obviously, we don't know the details of how that would look at this time, so we don't know how much it would increase the height and the width. And perhaps legal wants to just say quickly about how we would condition that, because we don't know how it will look. Therefore, what plans are we approving?
I assume that would require a deferral, but we don't have time for the deferral, so that's really the planning.
So in terms of this evening then, it's not something we can probably consider this evening in terms of the camouflage, other than the painting, which is all of it fir green, I believe, which has already been, as you've seen in the application. But I think, moving forward, I will certainly be writing to Councillor Smith in his role as portfolio holder, I think, on behalf of the committee, and I'll be asking if this is something that he and Cabinet could perhaps look at, because we are going to see more and more of these, and I think, it would be wise if we had some sort of policy in place to deal with these kinds of matters in the future, because I appreciate it is frustrating for residents. It's frustrating for us, because I know which way most of us would probably like to vote on matters like this, and I know, we have to be methodical, and we have to follow the rules by which we're bound and the laws by which we're bound, and I know sometimes there is that conflict, but I certainly think, Councillor Smith, you can expect a message from myself in the next 24 hours on this one. And I hope it's something that you would take forward yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I can confirm it's something that's in our interest to help this committee going forward. And if I can come back to Councillor Evans' example, if he can send me that, it would be a good starting point, I think, to look at what can be done.
Okay, do I have any other speakers? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Markham, my apologies.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not really related. It was about the camouflage. Coventry have actually got them on theirs. There's one on Jimmy Hill Way, and it's virtually the same size as the pole, but you can see that it's a tree. You can still see the pole inside it, but you can see it's a tree. So it may be worth, if you're doing some inquiries, perhaps to speak to them as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Markham. So if I have no other members who wish to speak, the committee is being asked to recommend that prior approval is required and approved tonight for this. So all those in favour of granting approval? Okay, against? Okay, and anyone who's abstaining? One abstention. Okay, so that has been approved then. Okay, and we'll move on to our next item when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal seeks consent for the erection of an entrance arbour and covered pergolas with timber booths to the front and side of the pub. A new patio area is also proposed to the side with LED festoon lighting adjoined to 3-metre high timber poles. Planning Committee are recommended to approve this application subject to conditions. The key considerations as part of this application are whether the principle of the development is acceptable, the impact on residential amenity, the impact on visual amenity and heritage, the impact on highway safety, and the impact on trees and ecology. Concerns were raised with regards to the issue of noise on nearby residents. Environmental health officers were consulted on this scheme and submitted a response of no objection subject to conditions. These conditions include the provision of an acoustic fence, which has now been shown on the drawings, as well as restricting the hours of operation of the outdoor area, as well as a noise management plan, which is to be submitted to control the use of the outdoor area. Subject to these conditions and others as listed within the report, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with both national and local planning policies with regards to these considerations. There have not been any substantive changes to the plans for this application, with the exception of the introduction of an acoustic fence. The fence is proposed to be 2.4 metres tall and will help to reduce the impact of noise on the amenity of neighbours. It is considered that this is a betterment to the scheme. In conclusion, the proposal is found to be in accordance with national planning policies, including the MPPF, as well as local planning policies, including the Borough Plan and relevant SPDs. On balance, the scheme is found to be acceptable, and therefore the recommendation is one of approval, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have one speaker on this, and that's Councillor Tromans.
Chair, if I may, before I begin, could I ask the officer to just go back to the plan?
Yes, of course.
Because there's some of it that's relevant. And could the officer point out and just clarify that the acoustic fencing is the curvy red line on the boundary at the bottom and not just that little flat piece above it with the dotted lines going to it? So that, the straight bit is the fence, that's all. Right, that's not clear. Okay. So, thank you, Chair. I need to give people a bit of a history to explain why the concerns about noise are what they are. Typically, we get people who choose to move next door to a pub who then moan about the fact that there's noise coming from a pub. This is a bit different. This is a hotel. It was since 47 when it was converted to a house to a hotel. It's always, or for many years, it was just a hotel with very, very limited use of the garden space. In fact, virtually none for decades. And a lot of the residents this impacts on in Clunes and Ferndale at the top end of Higham Lane have literally lived there for decades. And I don't mean 10 years or 20, I mean 40 years and more. And for much of that time, and I can attest I lived down Ferndale in the 80s as well, there just wasn't any noise nuisance meaningfully from the gardens and certainly none at night. However, in more recent years, because of the change of the way it's been operated, as one owner has come in over another, you know, in more recent times it's been Spirit Group and then they were taken over by Green King, who are currently the owners of it. There have been regular incidents of antisocial behaviour and statutory noise nuisance, which have involved officer time, a lot of officer time, from this council having to sort it out, going out there, monitoring the sound, setting noise limiters. We finally managed to solve most of it by getting the previous manager very, very amenable to get some works done to have air conditioning so they could keep the windows shut for when they had live bands. And he also agreed with us and the residents and licensing officer to clear the garden area of people by 10 because they stopped taking food orders about 9. The last thing that comes out the kitchens is about 15:15, and so typically people don't eat out there late anyway. So he was clearing it by 10 and getting the glasses and bottles and plates cleared away. Because that, if you look where that wavy red line is, that's pretty much where people's back gardens begin. And their back gardens are small. They're no bigger than from me to Councillor Wilson. And if you think about above Councillor Wilson's head, an open bedroom window, if I get a couple of bottles and throw them at 1:45 in the morning into a big plastic barrow for collecting all that stuff, that noise carries and disturbs people up Higham Lane and all sorts. If you're actually only that kind of 15, 20 metres away, your ear, through that open window, that's really loud. That's going to wake you up out your bed, and it does. And it's caused problems, and that's why Lee, the previous manager, agreed to those arrangements with myself and Ricky Castley, the officer. And the Chase has to have monthly meetings with residents. It's part of their licensing conditions. It's very rare to have that, but here's what the cause was. 73 complaints about one incident on one occasion triggered a licensing review, and that was a condition imposed on the Chase a few years ago because of the ongoing history. And as I say, since then, different management and ownership's been in, and that's pushed the boundaries and caused these nuisances, and we've had to have a lot of officers out to sort it out. So I would like to recommend I'd like to commend officers for putting forward the recommendations they have to limit this. The 2.4 metre acoustic fence, though, needs to be the boundary fence. Here is something that was signed by the Chief Executive, the Town Clerk of the Council, on the 4th of March 1947. It was the original planning.
Councillor Tromans, I will ask you if you could wrap up, please.
I will do very shortly. And it says, condition 4, that a substantial wall or fence will be built across the boundary to reduce noise to adjacent properties. And that's dated the 4th of March 1947, signed by the Town Clerk. It was never done. A fence, a much more modest thing, like a garden fence, was put up about 20-odd years ago, informally after residents' complaints by the Chase. What we need to do is have that acoustic fencing the whole boundary way so that it protects residents.
Sorry, you've gone well over your time. I have tried to be as lenient as I possibly can, Councillor.
I do appreciate that, Chair. There is one other thing that for the benefit of officers in the environmental enforcement and also in licensing, I've been told by planning officers that there's been no mention of a play park or play area there in the application. If that could be minuted, because that will be helpful to enforcement officers in other departments in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tromans. Could I ask any members if they have any points of clarification they would like to ask? Councillor Cape.
Yeah, it's paragraph 7, the conclusion. It talks about visual amenity. It's the Chase Hotel. Is it considered to be a public house now, or is it still a hotel? Because the visual amenity, it says it is in practice with public house gardens. So is it a public house or is it a hotel?
Councillor Tromans, can you clarify that?
Yeah, it's in my ward. It is described as, and by Green King, the owners, as the Chase Hotel. It is primarily a hotel. It's got quite a large accommodation block at the back, as well as some accommodation in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Points of clarification. Okay, so we have an application before us tonight, and we've been asked to recommend and grant planning permission subject to the conditions as printed. Do I have a proposer for this? Okay, Councillor Markham, and a seconder, Councillor Hartshorn. Okay, so with that in mind, then we'll move to the substantive discussion. Do I have any members who wish to speak on this? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I do share Councillor Troman's concerns about the length of the acoustic fence. Could I ask officers how that length was determined, on what basis, and would we be reasonable in extending the acoustic fence? Bearing in mind that I know we did something similar, actually I think it was at Councillor Troman's request with Ambleside, if I remember rightly, that we actually put in a condition that it should go a significant proportion of that distance. So I'm intrigued to find out how we've arrived at that 2.4. If I could have an answer to that, Chair, then I might come back in after, if I may.
Okay, I think there's a couple of points to clarify here. So the reason that the fence has been located in the position as shown on the plan is because there is a row of trees which separate the sort of pub garden and the residential dwellings behind. So basically the fence will sit in between the pub garden and where the trees start. The pub garden essentially finishes where the fence is shown to. So it is believed that there isn't really any need for it to extend any further round, and also there's potential that it would interfere with the trees, which I should point out are protected by way of tree preservation order.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you for that. And I can sort of see the point with the trees, and they have TPOs. However, if I remember my planning training from, admittedly it was a while back, we were always told that trees are not permanent features, that when we're looking at fencing and things like that, that we really shouldn't take them into consideration, because the next owner could come along and chop them down. I accept with a TPO it's a bit more difficult, but in theory, if the conditions were met for a TPO to cut the tree down or do significant works to it which would impede the ability of the trees to actually do the work, then the trees would lose their effectiveness. So I'm still concerned about over-reliance on the trees. So I would actually propose an amendment that it should be extended to the full length of the acoustic boundary should be extended to the full length of the boundary. Chair, I can't see how we could refuse it outright, but I think it would be an acceptable mitigation. And bearing in mind we have imposed it before on another planning application. Now, except that you have to treat everyone on its own merits, but it has been accepted as an acceptable method before, which hasn't been found to be unreasonable.
Yeah. Can I just confirm on that, the siting of the trees? Are the trees, are they actually within the boundary of the Chase Hotel, or are they some sort of like no man's land in between? Councillor Trowers, you seem to be indicating that you might be able to shed a bit of light on this one.
If the officer could again put the plan up. So there are just the red line one. So if you look at the wavy red line at the bottom there, you can see to the left there are some big trees. There's little round circly dotted things. There are the odd tree in the grounds, but they're not really shown there and not significant. The big trees are south of, down below that wavy red line, in a no man's land gap between, if you think the back of the houses are where that straight line, that box is at the bottom there. So where the red line goes down, it's going right to the back of somebody's back garden. And then the bit up to the right, there's a bit of a no man's land with some very big trees in. The other side of the boundary fence, which that red line is, and to the back of people's houses. So moving that little straight strip of acoustic fencing there and making the whole of that curved boundary fence, which is already a fence that's there, just making it a much better fence, that's all we're talking about. And that's that won't interfere with the trees at all. That just replaces a scrubby little fence with a really quite meaningful acoustic one. And it's just, I think the applicants put a little strip in there just to save some money. Well, you know, we want to protect residents and we want to save officer time in dealing with all the complaints. So making it the whole boundary fence being 2.4 metre acoustic would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tromans. I don't know if the officers can add anything to that at all, anything to confirm or deny or challenge anything Councillor Tromans has said. Yeah, you can confirm that. Yeah.
Yep, sorry, I've just reviewed what you were saying about the red line site, and I've just had a quick look at the condition. So at the moment we have got for the fence to be erected in accordance with this plan, we potentially could amend that to request a longer fence along the boundary rather than sort of essentially two fences. We probably could word something along those lines. I think that would be reasonable.
Could you show us clearly where you think that could you show us clearly where you think that second fence might go on this map? Could you sort of direct the cursor?
Yeah, so essentially my thoughts are we could do it sort of along, maybe from this similar point. It's kind of hard to determine where the residential properties are, but sort of, like you say, along here up until maybe this point.
There's houses that back onto it all the way along.
All the way along.
You need to do the whole bottom length.
Are we saying all the way up to sort of here? So sort of the south portion of the site, essentially.
And
the west side.
Yeah, not all of the west
Mm-hmm.
From off the corner of the grey area.
I am conscious we are putting officers on the spot this evening with this, and I think it's not something we can get them to judge by looking at a tiny picture, but it's something that we could perhaps look at if people are willing to condition. Councillor Shires, while you're sort of just debating that, I don't know if you're going to be long, or if you have an answer for us now, you can share. Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Shires and I'll come back to you. Okay? Yeah. So I'll come to you, Councillor Shires, and then we'll come back to these guys.
Thanks. A couple of things. With regards to acoustic fencing, I actually have 2 acoustic fences at the back of my house and they don't work. So maybe we should actually consider the whole of the area having the acoustic fence, or at least we're trying a little bit if they're going to do that. And secondly, as we are in such a residential area and acoustic fencing doesn't work, maybe actually reducing the time. So rather than being out in the garden until 10:30 at night, maybe reducing that down slightly, because it'd be like putting it smack bang next to I'm going to say Alderman Smith, that's how old I am, the Academy or Eton or any other school, high or primary. It's large residential. There are lots and lots of young people about, and would you want them to actually not be woken up during the night? I just think that, so that for me, that is a condition that I'd want put on there, so that it was a bit more family friendly.
Did you have another point at all, Councillor, or was that's okay? Okay, I've got 2 other hands that I've seen, so I'll go to Councillor Hammersley, then Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm loath to stop a business from expanding because in these difficult times that they have had, although that doesn't come into planning, but anything that we can encourage the business to survive and maybe increase the jobs for the local area as well, because a bigger business, more jobs. So I'm quite happy if we can appease the local residents with noise abatement, etc., etc., and the hotel does abide by the rules. I have no problem letting this go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we're on Councillor Shires' points. I think we're moving to a consensus on the fencing itself, but if I remember rightly, Chair, and Wahida might be able to confirm this for me, the hours of operation will be a licensing matter, wouldn't it? We couldn't condition that. I think that would have to be through licensing, wouldn't it? I think we've come across this before and we've been told it's licensing.
That's correct, Councillor Wilson. I was looking at the conditions. There is just the 2 conditions 6 and 7 in terms of use of the patio and the outdoor lighting. I don't know whether if you could maybe look at that.
Yeah.
But other than that, the use would be for licensing.
So yeah, so we could try to condition them to get licensing to look at that and to reassess. So that's what we could do. Yeah, but we could ask them to look at it. That would be the condition. You can't condition that, okay? Right, but we can request. We can politely request so that they look at that. Was that it, Councillor Wilson? Yeah, Councillor Hartshorn.
Yeah, I think I was going to say that if it's going to be quite an awkward one to solve, we could potentially defer until the next planning committee, where officers have decided, or come to the decision on what fencing would actually be practical.
Yeah, thank you. I think they're going to be able to give us some kind of an indication now. I mean, I think most of us, if we do go down that road, would probably trust their judgment in terms of going away and looking at it properly. I'm not necessarily sure we need to defer, but obviously I could stand to be corrected just now, so I'll let Jasmine explain what she's come up with.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I've had a quick discussion with colleagues. I think the issue here is that we've got a plan which shows the acoustic fencing, which means essentially we can't now approve this plan if we want to change where the acoustic fencing is going to be. I think what we would need is a new plan to show the amended acoustic fencing and where that's going to be. So it probably would have to be deferred so that we could get that plan, reconsult and bring it back to members. Obviously with that we run the risk of the fact that we only have until the end of this week to approve. We could seek to get an extension of time, but that isn't guaranteed. And in the meantime, they could appeal against non-determination for this application if we don't make a decision this evening.
Okay, so it looks like Councillor Hartshorn, you had your crystal ball firmly out there and read the situation. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to prolong this but I did, thinking back to the Ambleside issue, we did actually amend that at committee without deferring, without reconsulting, etc., etc. Can I have a legal opinion from Wahida on this, please? Sorry to keep putting you on the spot, Wahida, but I'm just conscious we've done it on one. Why can't we do it on this one? And does then that potentially make the other one that we've done void?
Chair, I'm not aware of the previous application. All I can say is that it's dependent on what can be agreed in terms of plan. If it's a condition, then I guess it will just be for the planners to agree that and bring, maybe it could be done by way of a delegated decision.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, while they're looking at, do I have any other members? No. Okay, Councillor Tremors, you wish to make a point?
Just to answer some of the questions, because these things have cropped up on other planning applications in St Nicholas before.
I know you're quite knowledgeable because I know you've sat on many planning application meetings in the past under the previous administration.
Indeed. So if we think about just down the road from there, the Lidl, one of the conditions was changed on the night that the acoustic fencing had to be a bit wider and longer than they had first proposed. And because that was made a condition, that just became part of the planning. So there's nothing to stop us conditioning that, as Councillor Wilson has indicated. Licensing, we've covered this because we got Ricky Cassellay to look into it for the Chase. Yes, some items, you're quite right, are licensing and some are planning. If you're talking about how long you have the lights on for and outside and the hours of usage of something, then that is a planning stipulation that we can condition. The licensing bit covers what times they can serve alcoholic beverages and have licensing activity like music. On this, the conditions that have been put forward are talking about you can't have the lights on after 10:30 and you can't make any use of the patio area or whatever. You can't use that area. And that's perfectly acceptable to put in as a planning condition for any building. You know, that's just the way it is. So they're the things that have come out of this before. The other thing about non-determination is the applicant only sent in the final plan and details on the 10th of August. So I'm sorry, the clock start from then, because until we've got a full complete application, the clock doesn't start, and we get how many weeks? 8, 12 weeks or whatever. So we shouldn't be under that kind of time pressure.
I think that's just
I'll defer to officers on that.
I think that's just about to probably get checked.
Cheers.
Councillor Treggers, we've got officers checking all sorts at the moment. Victoria. Right. Okay. So if we can all just listen in for Philip Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me. Just to pick up a couple of the points, I think what we're talking about here, I think Councillor Tremors is absolutely right in terms that that you can condition the use of the land, so you can put an hours condition on in terms of the use of the land. I think that's absolutely right, and that's why those conditions are there in the agenda. In terms of the sort of the extension of time, that's obviously agreed with the applicants, and that is a time period that is agreed. It's not a matter of when they submitted stuff. That's the time period which is agreed when we will make a determination. So we're stuck with that unless they agree a further extension. To try and move it forward, what you could do is, as Wahida has suggested, look at a delegated decision, which would be to, it would be worded something along the lines of subject to agreement with the, well, I suppose it'll be me at the moment with the no ash in post, that with subject to agreement, we delegate authority to grant permission upon the submission of a satisfactory scheme for the acoustic fence and anything else that the committee thinks would be sensible. Amended conditions, perhaps, if they want to alter the hours of operation, for example. So those are options available to you as a committee. That's not to say that the applicants will accept those, and they may well take a view and take us down the route of non-determination. So it's a balancing act in terms of how to take it forward, but that would certainly be a sensible way of trying to balance those competing interests. And whilst I'm on, Chair, it was in the back of my mind something that Councillor Tremont said at the outset, which is that the gardens to Ferndale or Clunes, I think it's Clunes Avenue there, are actually quite small. And so I'm not entirely sure whether a 2.4 metre acoustic fence would be welcomed necessarily by the residents. Some may, because of the impact it has on noise. Others may not, because they might well suffer loss of light. So I think we do need to be very careful about sort of trying to sort of make it up on the hoof. I think we need to be very careful about that. That's what I was going to say, Chair. It's entirely up to the committee how they want to take it forward. But if they want to give officers delegated authority to go and negotiate, we can do that. Otherwise, the committee will have to decide what it wants to do with this application.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's very helpful and very wise counsel. So we shall sort of take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So do I have any other members who wish to make any points? Okay, so I'm kind of getting a sense in terms of the original proposal as it stands before us to recommend is probably not something we want to do. So the first thing we would need to do, if that is the case, we would need to withdraw that, and then we'd need to put a new proposal forward. I believe that's the system. So going back to our proposer and our seconder, would you be happy possibly to withdraw that? Because I get very much the sense that we want to go down a different route in terms of conditions. Could I just have a show of hands of those who would like to condition, or sorry, proposed amendments of the conditions? Yeah.
But I thought that the advice that we just got was that we could put the condition in anyway, and then leave it for delegated decision rather than deferring.
That's not what we've got before us. It's to grant planning permit, which is it's something slightly different. So I think we want to include those conditions. I may be wrong on that, but I want to just make sure that we are definitely going in the direction we want to go. Okay. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to make a point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we don't necessarily need to withdraw. I think we can just amend, because this isn't a complete 180 against the original. It's just going with the original plus an extent with an amendment. So I think we could do an amendment. I'd be happy to move an amendment on the basis as outlined by Phil on the voice of God.
Okay. I'm happy to be guided by wiser and longer serving heads of this committee and taking into account the advice that Philip has just given us on that as well. I don't know if anything's going to come back from the Ambleside search for... Okay, so he is going to read out the proposal that was given to Ambleside, which I think fits this situation. So we'll get her to read that out, and then we'll sort of see what the membership thinks.
Okay, Chair, in that matter, the decision was for the Planning Permission be granted subject to the conditions as printed on the agenda, with the additional condition: no development shall commence until details of an acoustic boundary fence have been submitted to and approved in writing by the council. The use of the pavilion shall, well, in that case, shall not commence until the fence is installed on site in accordance with these details. The fence shall remain on site in perpetuity until otherwise agreed in writing by the council. So if you're happy to propose that, we can... Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. So thank you. So that's the proposal that we have. Obviously, officers will look at that wording, but I think we get the idea in terms of the direction that we're heading. I think that's in line with what we're trying to achieve. So I will ask then for all those in favour of those conditions. Okay. Against? Okay, so one. I think that's everybody, isn't it? Okay. Right, so we will look to add those conditions then. That as a condition. So we'll now go to the sort of vote on whether we want to grant that recommendation for planning permission with that conditioned, okay, as an additional condition. So all those in favour? Against? And abstentions? Thank you. Okay, so that has been passed with the additional condition. Okay, Councillor Tromond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the members of the Planning Committee. I know that was a difficult one. I really appreciate all of your input and everything on that. Thank you on behalf of the residents.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to our next item when you are ready. Thank you.
This application seeks consent for the erection of a two-storey side extension and single-storey rear extension. The application site is a south-east facing, three-bedroom detached two-storey dwelling located at 58 Copeswood Avenue, Nuneaton, Warwickshire. The property is set back from the street frontage with a front driveway, providing parking for up to 3 cars, and is characterised by brown brick and some stone cladding detail beneath the windows to the front of the property. The roof is pitched with a front-facing gable, and to the side is a carport which extends to the front wall of the property with a garage behind and has a flat roof design. The application is being recommended for approval due to being sound in terms of the Sustainable Design and Construction SPD and in terms of visual impact on visual amenity and highway safety. The proposal does not breach the 45 and 60-degree lines from either neighbouring property either side and does not impact the rear property at Whitestone Road. The proposal does not impact the visual amenity of the street scene. In terms of visual amenity, the Council's Sustainable Design and Construction SPD states that extensions and alterations should respect the form and size of the original building. The proposed two-storey side extension will be built up to the boundary with the neighbour. This will involve the demolition of the existing carport and garage. The extension proposes a shallow pitched gabled roof, which would be set down from the main ridge, appearing subservient to the main dwelling. The front wall at ground floor level is to be set back from the front wall of the main dwelling by 0.5 metres and by 1 metre at first floor level, creating a subservient design. Furthermore, the extensions propose to use matching materials to the dwelling as existing. In terms of the addendum items, please note that we have had a new plan to include a rear first floor window, as the previous plan had not included this window. So note this change in plan schedule, which is also on the addendum. The new plan has been added to our website, and the window does not impact residential amenity of any rear occupiers due to the distance of over 40 metres to any rear habitable room windows of the properties at the rear of the application site. Following on from the additional consultation with revised plans, further points of concern were raised in addition to the original concerns, including the following: concerns regarding the inaccuracy of the positioning of the curb and the concerns regarding the boundary and party wall issues, concerns regarding the labelling of plans and the nature of the plans, concerns that the applicant is a builder by profession and the proposed unsociable potential hours of work which would be around their day-to-day job. With regards to the additional comments received following consultation regarding the drop curb, although shown on the plans, it does not form part of the description of works as it does not require planning consent. This is because Copeswood Avenue is a Category D road, and so only consent from the Highway Authority would be required. Nevertheless, the drop curb will have no impact upon residential amenity. Further to this, planning legislation does not extend to party wall disputes, and proposed hours of construction is not a material planning consideration. Neighbours were reconsulted on amended plans, and based on new comments received to these plans, the plans have included reconsultation due to the word front being in the original description as received in the application form by the agent, which in planning terms assumes an extension protruding beyond the existing front elevation of the existing building. There is no extension protruding beyond the front elevation of the existing building. We have a statutory requirement for descriptions to match the proposal, and hence the description was changed to remove the word front, consequently leading to consultation with neighbours. The revised plans are also a reduction in size to the original plan submitted. However, reductions in most circumstances for householder applications do not warrant reconsultation. However, significant changes to the description wording where required does. Therefore, in this instance, the principle of development remains the same, and the recommendation is one of approval.
Thank you. I believe we have a speaker, or at least we have a statement from an objector on this, which is Mrs. Jackie Stokes. I think you've got that with you, so if you'd like to read that out for us, please.
For committee hearing 30th of August, apologies for my lack of attendance. I was unable to arrange childcare at such short notice, but would be grateful if the following could be read out on my behalf. We would like to reiterate that our previously submitted list of objections still stand, but appreciate the time constraints within the hearing, so will not be able to discuss each point. We will therefore focus on our main points of concern in no particular order. The submitted plans are extremely basic and lack detail. To this end, it is difficult for us to understand what is being proposed. There are limited measurements given, unclear detail regarding gutter positioning or overhang. The shared sewage drain between the driveways is not detailed at all or suggested where it will be located to. There is very basic detail regarding the materials to be used, i.e. no mention of roofing material and no technical details given at all. Within the plan showing this is to be built up to and over the boundary line, it is causing a large degree of anxiety to us as to how this will be completed and the end result for our own property. One drawing included on the original plans clearly showed the side plans going over the party wall boundary has since been excluded from the resubmitted plans. A planning officer had voiced their concern to us about this diagram, but it was so clear that the plan exceeded the boundary of 58's property, but it has since been omitted. We would like detailed plans to be submitted, including technical details measurements. The applicant has recently installed a section of block paving outside his property. When doing so, he stored the pallets of bricks and tons of bags of sand on the public footpath for months. It was a safety issue for all people using the pavement. As the street is used by many children and adults for the local school runs, some with pushchairs, there is a lot of footfall, a lot by older residents who go to collect their daily newspaper. Due to the shop And we have also a couple of very local residents who use mobility scooters. We would ask that consideration be given to an agreement being made that the public path cannot be used to store work materials to prevent safety issues for all users. On a personal note, it also made it dangerous for us to leave our drive as we could not see past the obstruction down the road or at the junction of Rossway. Likewise, the applicant has recently had a skip left on the road for months with no cones or lights, and whilst this is almost directly opposite the junction with Rossway, this was a safety concern. We would ask that an agreement is made that anything left meets legal requirements for the greater safety of all road users. The applicant has a car and a van which he parks across his house on his driveway. There is only one driver at the property, again leaving less storage space for the work material and making the access and egress of delivery van lorries a safety concern for all, and in particular for us to use our adjoining driveway and walking our 2 young children to and from school each day. Chair, there is... Would you like me to?
I can see there's rather a lot there still
Yeah.
to go. Could you summarise? Is there any way you could just summarise the 2 points?
So the penultimate point is the plans include a side first floor window into a WC room with only a toilet and a wash basin. We would request that this be rejected as we strongly consider applying for a mirror image extension if this one is to be approved due to the loss of use of our driveway and light into our house. And the final point is we do have a young family and would kindly ask for consideration be given to agreed timings when the work can take place.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I don't know if the officers have got any comeback on anything that was raised in the statement, or whether you're happy with it as it stands. Yeah, so you're happy with that as it stands, okay. So we've got a proposal in front of us to recommend an approved planning permission tonight for reasons as printed in your agendas. Do I have a proposer for that? Okay, Councillor Cape, and the seconder, Councillor Hartshorn. Okay, so I'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one to assess because the actual plans that we have in front of us aren't, and I share Mrs. Stokes' frustration with this. If you look at the top line and the very end drawing, that is the proposed side elevation, which is essentially a great big black monstrosity. Now, this may be copying issues, so I've gone and had a look at the board over there, and it is a bit lighter on the board compared to in our plans and on the screen. But it is still, if you compare it to the one below it, which is the existing side elevation, if I was living next door to that, I would find that very oppressive, a complete blank, dark brownish wall with no other features whatsoever. Now, we haven't got any indication as to what the final rendering will look like or anything like that, so I find it very difficult to come to a final conclusion. So on that basis, in itself, having the extension on Cotswold Avenue isn't, without wishing to downplay, it's neither here nor there, because other houses have had them, so it wouldn't be incongruous with the street scene per se. But I think that would be oppressive and would be out of keeping with the area. So on that basis, I can't vote for it based on the very limited information I have in front of me, unless officers can tell me they've had other information about the type of materials which are going to be received or used. How it looks to me looks very oppressive, and I wouldn't want to live next door to that.
I don't know if officers have got any comeback on in terms of materials.
So the shading of the extension is to demonstrate the extent of the extension, but the applicant has agreed that if, depending on the outcome of tonight, no external materials should be used other than those of the same type, texture and colour as those in the existing building, unless otherwise agreed in the council by ourselves. So the materials used would match the existing dwelling.
Does that help you in your determination, Councillor Wilson?
Well, it doesn't really help, to be fair, because the way it looks on there, it's still brick patterned on there and a dark brick pattern. which to me looks still very dark and oppressive. So I accept it's a judgment call and I accept its individual taste on that, but
I'm happy because I don't think we've got any time constraints necessarily on when we're going to pass this one. Whether we could do a site visit, whether that's something that you would perhaps like, if that would help ease and assuage your mind as to the right way ahead. I know what other members, I can see a few nods going around.
If members think it would be useful, I'm happy to propose that as a motion.
Okay, Councillor Shires just wanted to say something, I think, first, and then I'll come back to that.
Yeah, thanks. It wasn't so much about that. It was when the statement was being read out, what jumped out to me was she said something about that on a previous drawing it had encroached on her land, and the planning officers had picked that up as well, and then something new was put in, but it wasn't quite clear. I don't know if I misheard. Did I mishear? But there was something where they were concerned about, and she mentioned the planning officers. And that's, I picked it up, it fell in, and then I've been looking at other bits, so I don't know if I did hear that
We'll just see
correctly.
if you just bear with us 1 second, we'll just see if we can find
No,
that
thanks.
part of it.
Oh, I found it. One drawing included.
So the statement said one drawing included on the original plans clearly showed the side plans going over the party wall boundary has since been excluded from the resubmitted plans. A planning officer had voiced their concern to us about this diagram, as it was so clear that the plan exceeded the boundary of 58's property, but it has since been omitted. We would like detailed plans to be submitted, so I don't know. Planning can.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the original point then. Sorry, I thought your point was following on from Councillor. I mean, it is a valid, obviously a valid point, but I thought it might be following on. So, Councillor Whittle, you said you were prepared to propose that. Okay, so is that still the case, a site visit? Yeah, okay, I'm happy to second that. So could I have a show of hands, all those in favour of a site visit? Okay, against? Abstentions? Okay, so that is carried. So we will defer that for a site visit if we can.
So in terms of the encroachment on the boundary of the neighbouring property, the original plans didn't indicate any overlap. The proposed extension was well within the location plan boundary, the red line boundary, and then the applicant, at my request, submitted amended plans because I felt that the extension was in breach of the 45-degree line and the 60-degree line at the front and the rear. So with the resubmission of the latest set of plans, which include those that are on the screen right now, there is no encroachment on the boundary. And I think the main concern was the front elevation, where there is a garage, which is adjacent to the garage on the application site address, which has got a canopy overhead. So the idea is to demolish the canopy, and that's where the concern is, because the extension projects beyond that. But that garage cannot be protected because it's not a habitable room. As a result, the majority of the proposal was, in fact, all of the proposal was compliant with the SPD of the Sustainable Design Guide. Hence, on balance, especially with the condition of the materials, there were not very strong reasons for refusal. So there's no encroachment on the boundary line, and I can check that prior to going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd still like a site visit, quite honestly, because I'm getting a little bit sort of confused in terms of the geographical, the topographical layout of this one. And I do want to make sure we reach the right determination on this one, and because there's nothing stopping us in terms of when we have to get this done by. I think, you know, to proceed and just delay so we can do a site visit in a few weeks' time would be, you know, to everybody's benefit, including members here tonight, so we can reach the correct determination. So I'm happy for that to stand. So if we could pencil that site visit in, please, for the next meeting, if possible. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that is, sorry, yes, the reason for the site visit. We've got one more item to go. and I'm just conscious of the time. It is 8:30 now, and I'm just thinking about voting for a move to suspend standing orders should we need it. So, yeah, so you're happy to second that, Councillor Wilson. All those in favour to suspend standing orders should we need to? Thank you, that's carried. Okay, and we'll move on to our final item tonight then.
This application seeks consent for a single-storey extension to the side to form a garage and the relocation of the fencing to the side of the site. The additional bathroom window to the first floor front elevation does not require planning permission. The width and height of the extension is within the realms of permitted development, meaning that it would not normally require planning permission. However, as the extension would be projecting closer to a highway, it requires consent. The application is being recommended for approval due to being sound in terms of the sustainable design and construction SPD and in terms of impact on visual amenity and highway safety. The proposal does not breach the 45 and 60-degree lines from either neighbouring property and does not impact the rear property at Whitestone Road. The proposal does not impact the visual amenity of the street scene. The proposed wall is to be moved 0.5 metres closer to the boundary of the application site, meaning that it will be up to Cresswell Close, but will remain entirely within the site ownership of 310A Weddington Road. The wall will be highly visible within the street scene. However, it is considered that as the proposed wall is to be moved by just 0.5 metres compared to the original position and will be of the same height and depth as the existing wall, this will not cause harm to the visual amenities of the area. Warwickshire County Council Highways were consulted on the application and provided a statement of no objection on the 28th of April. Highways were reconsulted on the 10th of August following submitted detailed plans of the proposed wall and offered no further comments and maintained their stance of no objection to the proposal and the wall. In terms of addendum items, following on from further consultation, Highways provided a statement of no objection to the wall on the 12th of August. The materials proposed for the wall are to also match the existing dwelling, as agreed through email from the agent on the 23rd of August.
Thank you. We have one objector to this who would wish to speak, and that's Mr. Hodgson. I would thank you for your patience this evening, because I know you've waited right till the end for that. So thank you very much for your patience. And I say you have your 3 minutes now.
I'm not used to being first anyway. So I've never spoken in an arena like this, so you'll have to excuse if I'm nervous. But I'll try and be concise and precise. I'm speaking for 6 pensioners in Creswell Close. We cannot understand how plans for Weddington Road should adversely affect the whole of Creswell Close. We've had 40 years of total easement to our drive, but the reciting of the wall will end that. I'm now doing 3-point turns so I don't hit those stone troughs, which is where the new wall will be. The photographs I provided clearly show the problem. I don't know whether you've got them, but I did provide them. Firstly, the garage is unusually wide at 13 feet and looks as though it will impinge on our entrance. But the reciting of the wall will give us the biggest headache. And it's not a minor change, which some people think, because we have no street lights, no curbs, and something that's both difficult and dangerous, day and night, year after year, sooner or later, we will have an accident. The wall is so close to the drive. Even though the wall is 1 metre from the tarmac, and I understand that 1 metre clearance is a legal requirement, the drive is still very narrow, but designed to be aesthetically pleasing for the residents and gives us total easement and unfettered access to our drives. The design was even praised by planners at the time, who said it gave an added value to the area. In summary, the garage can be built without demolishing the wall. The original builder gave 4 bungalows a decent drive and a very good 2-metre wall for the applicant's own privacy. Only residents and families and deliveries use the drive, The applicant has never used the drive, doesn't need to, hence they can't see our problems. There's also 6 inaccuracies on the application, and that should also weigh against it going forward. The application says they're the sole owner. In reality, it's a shared drive between 6 properties. Parking not affected, it will be reduced. No trees removed, 2 trees have been removed. Public not affected. Our pedestrian visitors will be affected because it's so narrow and the wall makes it even narrower. No pre-advice. When I saw people measuring the drive, I was told by the applicant these guys worked for the council and any changes would be done properly. Sounds like pre-advice to me. And there's no detail about the wall, only a thin red line which you can see on the left-hand picture, only a thin red line on the plan, and that incidentally is in the wrong place. Finally, it's not right that we continue to have to make our guests aware of the awkwardness when leaving, pointing out the problems. A narrow drive with no lights or curbs shouldn't be made worse. And can I emphasise that the wall doesn't need to be demolished to build a normal-sized garage? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Perfect timing there.
Bang on, yeah. I've been practicing. I've been practicing.
I think you've done this before. Okay, I'll move to... sorry. Mr. Hodge, could you just turn off your microphone, please? Yeah. Can I just confirm that members did actually receive the photos that were sent by Wahida? So could you, sorry, clear show of hands. Yeah, we did. Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay. Can I just ask, are there any points of clarification that anyone would like to ask Mr. Hodgson? Yeah, Councillor Cape.
Not ask Mr. Hodgson.
Right, okay, officers. Yeah, that's fine.
If we're going to do a site visit because of the fact that it might impair somebody's view, should we not consider a site visit to see exactly what the layout of that wall is going to be? Because I would move that was what we should do.
Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. If that's what the Planning Application Committee wish to do, they want to get eyes on the ground, that's fine, yeah. That's what you wish to propose, Councillor?
Certainly.
Right, so we have a proposal there to do another site visit. So I'll deal with that first of all then before we go any further. All those in favour of a site visit? The reason being because we'd like to have a look actually at just how narrow it is for ourselves and to sort of like check to see whether there is enough space there to turn a vehicle and whether it will have an impact in terms of visitors and parking in the area. Okay, so sorry, Councillor Shires, you were happy to second that. Thank you. All those in favour then of conducting a site visit? Okay, so that is unanimous. So we will defer that with a site visit over the coming weeks. Okay, so that concludes this evening's Planning Application Committee. If we could stop the live stream. I will thank all members of the public who have attended tonight and councillors for your forbearance. Okay, so thank you very much to everyone.